Hey fam, you know what you're here for. We're taking you with us every step of the way from pre-interview to finished story video. And it all starts here with the pre-interview. These tend to get long, so in this video, Jake and I will be teaching you tips and tricks for conducting the interview. But at the end, there will be a link to the full interview in its uninterrupted glory, so you can watch how we implement those tips and tricks, or you can move on to the next video about gear and interviewing. But enough of me jabbering, let's get into it. A key thing that I find when I'm helping people tell stories is that just like Ariel, they know what they went through, and they know the chronological order of events, and they know the struggles they went through, and they can simplify those down into a single sentence. But because nobody else was there to experience it, we can't bring people into the story with just the timeline, right? It's not immersive to hear a timeline. A timeline is something you can find in a history book. So what I always push for is the things that will help us put ourselves in the speaker's shoes. Where did your sense of control in your life stand at that point? Like, as a kid, who was God to you? Was it hard? In those things, we get to the feelings of the person. And when we get to the feelings of our subject, we begin to be able to immerse ourselves because people can empathize.
When I was taking notes, I wanted to focus on the idea of telling it in a 3-act structure and identifying the elements of that. Mm-hmm. So I separated my notes into beginning, middle, and end. And so in the beginning, I loved it when you asked the question about like, what was your relationship with God as a kid? How did that develop? I wrote notes about that. Middle, I wrote a lot about like the things you talked about, the transitioning and that disconnect turning into a connect between faith and work. The transitional time is kind of what it seemed like you were talking about a lot in that middle section. And then in the end, I wanted to focus a lot on like your feelings for like where you're at now and where that process led you and things like that. And so I wrote a ton of notes about how you're feeling right now, and that's kind of how I wanted to direct my questions when I talked about the end stuff.
I also have been making notes for myself of specific themes that I notice in her life. So an example of some themes I've noticed in this one is I've noticed there's a trend from isolation to community. We've got a lot of different individual struggles, but through all of that, what I'm noticing is that there's an element of community at every shift. Where, okay, now there's a mentor in my life who says, hey, I support you when you move into freelance. Now there's a life group who can counter that inner monologue that says I'm weird and I'm broken because I don't feel motivated. And so I've literally just put it in a big box right there that just says like prefers comfort over challenge. And then down here, I've got another box that talks about community being the counter voice to that. When I know the themes I'm gonna follow, it helps me optimize the interview. The truth is, we're not going to be able to tell your life story. What we're going to be able to tell is a story from your life. Mm-hmm. And that, like, where I'm noting down themes and where he's breaking it into chunks, what I'm looking for is a challenge she's overcome, and then the key piece of overcoming that challenge. So for me, when I think about this story based on what you've told me, I think that the story we're telling is going to be about finding peace in releasing control. That seems to be the element of this that one, you don't have closure on, which is going to be way more relatable for a viewer than a story that resolves and God made everything perfect for me. Mm-hmm. But two, it's something that, again, affects every other mini struggle that we've talked about, every sort of, if you want to call them episodes in the larger season of your life. Mm-hmm. They all have this, okay, well, my sense of control affected this. It affects money, it affects relationships, it affects family, it affects your career decisions. To do that, it seems to me like the recurring theme is every time an element of community was added to your life, you got a little bit more comfortable releasing control. So that to me says, okay, that gives me a great starting point for the interview, for when we get to the actual conversation. What's important is that you are not altering the person's story they're telling. I didn't put any words into Ariel's mouth unless I was asking for clarification on a detail I misunderstood. Other than that, I never asked, I don't finish her sentences for her. I'm not telling her, oh, you should say this quote. I did write down quotes she said in this interview. So there are some things, like we all love to have that little hook line in the beginning where someone's like, oh man, everything was horrible because of that car accident on the darkest storm day and the worst day of my life. And then the music fades out and you get that slow motion B-roll and it's like, everyone loves that. Don't put those words into your subject's mouth. I'm able to come down here, I've got several quotes from Ariel, like I prefer comfort over challenge is a thing that she said. And that's totally quotable. You could stick that in the beginning and anyone who's watching can go, oh, I know those feels. I get that. And she may say something even better in our other interview. That's why I don't use scripts. Because it's a lot more candid and feels a lot more natural to just speak to someone and say, hey, tell me about your life. and I'm gonna ask her questions based on these notes, but she may tell the same story a different way or remember a detail she missed in this interview or whatever else. And by not having a script, I leave that opening for like, hey, maybe there's more to this than we even covered just now. We only spent like, what, 30 minutes? 36 minutes, yeah, so we only spent like 35 minutes on it. There's got to be more. And if we used a script, we would preclude all of that. The next chunk of this video series is gonna be focused on gear, setup, tech, and how we tell a story based on the themes we have. I'm Josh Hughes, I save you time, cash, and sanity as we all pursue that next level of excellence. And just like last time, I'll see you next time.